Welcome to the overview of the 2021 Bordentown City Comprehensive Master Plan. Our agenda this evening is primarily to present the draft and, while doing so, review the process we've undertaken to get there. You will hear a summary overview of this fine city, in addition to a brief summary of the input we received thus far through the engagement process. The balance of our time will then be spent presenting the goals and then recommendations of this plan before turning it back over to Chairman Kennedy and the Planning Board for questions and feedback from the public. The process began by forming a committee of residents and business owners who provided feedback and input as to the process. The idea behind the steering committee, when combined with the stakeholder and advocacy group interviews, was to facilitate pushing the master plan conversation deeper into the community. Many times the work of citizen boards like the Planning and Zoning Board do, and even the governing body for that matter, is not as closely followed by the public. Every month, these groups of dedicated volunteers, elected and appointed residents, meet to discuss these important matters. We sincerely thank all the volunteers of this community, whether you participated in this master plan or plant flowers in front of your home. It takes collaborations, partnerships, and care across the entire community to make Bordentown the great place that it is. So what exactly is a comprehensive plan? While a plan can address social framework issues, it is, however, generally a plan for how the city's physical infrastructure, such as sewer, water, roads, buildings, and land use, such as housing, commercial development, and parks, are coordinated and then leveraged. A master plan provides a vision for the future. One thing it is not is a regulation or ordinance governing the community, but it is important nonetheless. It provides the community a plan for coordinating finite resources and leveraging them holistically so that the ordinances that are then created to implement it can then be thoroughly vetted and understood. In New Jersey, a comprehensive plan is mandatory in order to effectuate zoning. Zoning, of course, is what a community utilizes to maintain order within the built environment and provides predictability in land use. More importantly, a comprehensive plan has the ability to not only coordinate investment, but enables the community to be more responsive and resilient towards ever-changing conditions. During the process, we developed this vision statement, which encompasses a lot of positive ideas boiled down into a single statement. Bordentown is, in fact, an established community with a lot of character and characters. It has what many communities strive to be these days: vibrant and resilient. We are, in fact, a little city with a lot of charm. So we officially began this process pre-COVID in August of 2019. COVID did squash some of our ideas for community workshops, but as we got into the analysis and into initial conversation with stakeholders, we realized what the city needed was just a smattering of creative ideas and fixing what was broke, not wholesale change. So the adjustments to online meetings seemed to work out fine for the initial draft. Now that we're back to somewhat live again, it's nice to be here with you and have somewhat of a normal dialogue in order to gain further input regarding the plan. If you came later to the game, or if you've been here all along, you're here and you're welcome. So this is where we've been. A lot of analysis, mapping, meetings, and writing. As a resident of Bordentown for the last 10 years or so, some experience too. Nonetheless, a draft comprehensive plan that the Planning Board and City can be proud of. While we have continued to receive written comments online, we are not done. The City has continued to want to ensure we gather additional input before we finalize this plan and adopt it. Eager to get past the plan stage and into plan implementation, which you will hear time and time again this evening, much more work needs to be done. The comprehensive plan provides a framework, not the detail of an ordinance. So we will certainly require much more detailed discussion and community input, particularly for ideas in neighborhoods where certain land uses or ideas present themselves specifically. They all require much more analysis. So, you know where we are, in the center of a lot of interesting places and smack dab between the New York and Philadelphia marketplace. Well, a little closer to Philly. But like other communities and places presented on this graphic, our community is at the forefront of this nation's revolution. A lot of players rolled up through here, and there remains great interest in experiencing what Bordentown has to offer. Add a river and the great resources we have in our people, and the city has a recipe for success. The census estimated an anticipated population increase to 4,012 for 2020. We'll see about that as the census has yet to release its new data. Regardless, we remain relatively stable in that 3,900 to 4,000 population range. As households nationwide are shrinking, transitions of population from aging to new family households do continue to present some fluctuations. However, unless ocean spray redevelops, which seems unlikely in the short term at this point, Bordentown will see relatively flat growth. We are 1 square mile after all. And thanks to Mayor Lynch and the commissioners, we just shut off the development potential of the 70-acre Divine Word site, which is also known as Point Breeze, the former Bonaparte estate. Thank you to all for those efforts. It's truly huge, and we look forward to planning the future of that site. The analysis of such a planning effort includes both what's on the plan currently, as well as what's actually on the ground. Generally speaking, Bordentown's general land use categories match up with the land uses presented under the zoning. Residential is residential. Commercial is generally commercial. But zeroing in on the characteristics of specific neighborhoods, lot sizes and setbacks in particular, we see huge differences between the characteristic of parcels within the same zone, specifically the R3 zone, the medium and high density residential zone, which we'll talk about later. This zone is of particular importance because it incorporates the majority of residential zone in town, and for some reason it is nowhere near consistent with what's on the ground. It just doesn't make any sense. The zoning issue aside for a moment, the city's historical patterns of development allow it to remain a resilient place. Over time, the city has ebbed and flowed in an economic sense, but its compact street network, historic development patterns, and sense of place, though not without its challenges at times, plays host to a dynamic mixed-use community that continues on. While demographics and personalities may change, Bordentown City is quintessentially America at her best. The only thing really left to do is tinker and be creative. Sidewalk and streetscape improvements, lighting and ADA accessibility. Capitalizing on our history, strengthening our relationships with the environment, both practically and logistically, for example, stormwater. And public-private partnerships for parking, for creative business opportunities, working with the township on Route 206 improvements, and the like. So quickly summarizing some of the input we received thus far, we see the survey which was put out in December of 19 and ran through April of 2020. The one thing that posting the survey on Facebook and the city's website has taught us is that we need to continue to be creative about communication with the public. Regardless of the fact, the public should be aware that our boards and commissions agendas are posted for everyone to see, and we do want you all involved. For what you'll see here is no surprise. Parking remains an issue, but so is pedestrian safety. The most important points within this is that people overwhelmingly believe that being able to walk around town is what makes Bordentown truly great. Being a town whose bones were laid out during a time of the horse and buggy, it's important to continue to improve on our streets for residents and businesses while recognizing that widening streets and additional parking fields are not really options. Stakeholder interviews occurred throughout the summer and into the fall. We met with a whole host of folks from a variety of different organizations. The firehouses, economic development people, environmental folks, historic society, and the commissioners themselves as they are the department heads of DPW, finance, and the police. All told, about 50 individuals, not including the planning board. 51 once we loop in our new mayor. Congratulations. The interviews really underscored the notion that when we work together, great things can happen. Generally, throughout these interviews, we saw support for a wide variety of creative ideas that you'll see later on in the recommendation section. Ideas that, again, will require more analysis before finalizing, but folks generally wanted to see these concepts vetted out at the next stages of implementation. Through our analysis and feedback, we developed 10 basic goals that then guided additional goals presented within the general categories of economic development, housing, circulation and parking, and open space and recreation. Nurturing the downtown, housing, preserving and reinforcing our storied heritage, the highway corridor, the waterfront, resiliency and environmental stewardship, public safety, coordination, providing adequate and integrated open space, and improving mobility and access. All of these are important considerations. Specifically on the economic development side, we see history being a big part of the driver of our local economy, in addition, of course, to our great businesses. Improved wayfinding and improved circulation, being able to cross the highway and the gateway treatments we can announce coming into town, parking management, and most importantly, the pedestrian environment are all important components of our local economy. Throughout the master plan, you will see a lot of crossover in the goals and other various components of the plan. After all, the economics of a community and its quality of life are supported by not only its residential and commercial markets, but its character, its charm, accessibility, natural resources, parks and open space. It's all truly connected. Onward, we find housing and community development goals. The plan encourages preservation and rehabilitation. Affordable housing is an important topic within New Jersey specifically, which will require a separate housing and plan element. But ensuring folks can age in place and renters can continue to live here are important considerations to our economy as well. Open space and recreation is another broad category where we set specific goals. From embracing the waterfront to incorporating arts and history throughout town and being creative with our public streets. These goals allow us to get creative and how to make best use of all of our spaces, both traditional open spaces in parks with non-traditional, like utilizing our streets as public spaces. The last bucket in the goals section is circulation and parking. Obviously, they're important considerations, but overall mobility is far more important than just automobiles. It's people on foot, on bike, and even wheelchair. What bubbled up to the top in these goals was enhancing mobility across all modes of transportation, a complete streets approach, if you will. Management of parking was another. We can not only improve our capacity for parking, but more importantly, our management of it. We have business owners and their staff parking directly on Farnsworth Avenue. In our public parking lots, we have residents who sometimes don't move their cars for weeks. We can and must do better in this regard. Also important is our trails network, which enhance pedestrian circulation in general. Part and parcel is being able to cross the highway as well. The recommendations are quite simple. Improve what we got and be creative. Our recommendations have 5 general categories, as you'll find on this slide, including general and administrative. The other categories line up with the goals that we just discussed: economic development, housing, open space, and circulation. On the administrative side, there's some assessment that I do think is warranted, although we don't need to get crazy. After all, we are a 1 square mile town, and there's really no need to get overly bureaucratic. But with the changing landscape of retail and the assistance we might be able to provide the business community and the Downtown Business Association, in addition to residents' interest in seeking rehabilitation of their homes, all could be important functions of somebody well-versed in planning and economic development to supplement the city's already outstanding staff. The biggest, most onerous recommendation on this level is to revisit the land development ordinance and update it. Once upon a time, about 16 years ago, the city tried to do this once before and it got shelved for many reasons. But after looking at it, there's really no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to surgically go through this and flesh out the better ideas and explore them in much more detail and through public engagement. Perhaps the biggest reason to amend the zoning laws is the fact that almost all of our zones are out of sync. So we'll go back to the R3 zone, where we see it all clear as a bell. The R3 zone consists of single-family, attached, detached, and semi-detached. Of the 946 lots, we see 79% of detached houses not meeting the minimum yard area of 5,000 square feet. In the semi-detached category, 86% don't meet the minimum lot area, 80% don't meet the lot width, and 75% don't meet either of those requirements. These stats are really horrible, but it makes sense once you hear them and understand the zone in which they govern. After all, the R3 zone includes Thompson, Mary, Prince, and the bookends of Farnsworth Avenue. Anyone who knows the town at all knows that you can't have zoning that meets the criteria of those particular streets. We need to fix this. Within the economic development recommendations, we see a fine-tuning of the downtown. Obviously, we ran into some issues during COVID that need to get ironed out, especially when we closed the street. But the idea of being creative is what's really most important here. To help further protect us from the war on retail by online shopping, businesses need to be provided with additional tools and flexibility to be creative. We saw this specifically in practice when a few of our shops started sharing space with one another. It turns out that today, both of these shops not only survived COVID, but because we allowed them to do something that wasn't allowed under the ordinance in order to stay afloat, now they occupy their own separate individual retail spaces and are valuable businesses. Other issues we've been exploring is continuing the outdoor cafe experience and figuring out how to make that permanent amidst our parking needs, but also maintaining a downtown as a place to enjoy an evening outside while respecting adjacent residents. There's a balance that we need to work on. Bed and breakfast was something we wanted to carry through from the last planning effort. I think the idea is a good one, but not without significant controls. I don't want to see too many of them, and I certainly don't want to see them in a way that changes the character of the neighborhoods themselves either. So this idea, if it's going to be implemented at all, is not going to happen without a lot of discussion. Similarly, the downtown fringe, which means properties that are adjacent to the downtown proper, might be primed to allow some additional considerations, maybe office or some other type of transitional mixed use. Today we actually see some of this in practice when you look at Walnut Street, for instance, through the post office, and Crosswick Street, where you see accountants and funeral homes that are outside of the actual downtown zone. Again, this idea is something that requires much more specific attention, but could be something that allows a transition from the more vibrant commercial uses to something next level down as you then transition into the neighborhoods themselves. Creative infill for public spaces. This is something we got some written comments on, and I think it's worth taking a little bit of time here to explain it a bit further. First, there was this idea of using Railroad Avenue and the railroad right-of-way itself as a means of expanding the pedestrian circulation system. One is connecting it down to the waterfront through and to the light rail station, and then the other was perhaps decking over the cut that is basically a hole that the train runs through once a month. It's an idea worth considering. Its cost might be high, but I think there's a way to develop it where they might not be. Who knows? But it's an idea worth considering as well. This idea for Park Street got some folks upset, but it's a privately held lot that could be developed fully with a house, or maybe even a few houses today. The idea that we're presenting here is the idea that working with a property owner may allow some infill development while at the same time adding some pocket park space as a public amenity. It's an idea is all it is. But unless somebody else purchases it or the city purchases it, property rights in America are private property rights, and the property has the right to develop. Another idea we tossed around was the fact that garden-style apartment buildings, 2 of them in the downtown, could be designed to be more reflective of the downtown with some creative use of their open common spaces. This, of course, would require working out a deal with the property owners if they were even amenable to it, which would allow for some limited public use of the space. Perhaps even the property owner could rent space out to a pop-up shop on festival days. Who knows? It's an opportunity worth exploring, and the idea was one that we thought was worthy of putting it in the plan because it spurs other ideas for different areas. Other recommendations in the plan under economic development include circulation and parking, in addition to creative use of the street. While we do creatively use the street from time to time when we shut it down for Cranberry Fest and the like, COVID showed us some other opportunities that exist out there. Other cities and towns have really done some really creative things in addition to what we've done as well. Of course, we would need to work out with emergency management and ensure safety and access considerations, but there is something interesting in the idea of using public streets as public spaces. And I think we could do that in very systematic ways that recognizes the neighborhood's considerations as well. While I know there are many questions you would have before the city would allow cannabis to be sold here, what I do know is the city has until August to decide if they're in or they're out. If no action is taken, then the city is automatically in under the confines of the legislation. The ballot initiative proved that residents in the city, county, and state support the idea. And while we think we need to be much more deliberative on the matter, I believe the commissioners will be taking this on this month, so stay tuned. For what we do know in the regulations is that municipalities have a great opportunity to control exactly what type of entity comes into town, where, and importantly, how, including the ability to set up a local licensing process that ensures that they get community host benefits beyond the local tax. We could, in fact, put together a program such as drug awareness. We could do a workforce training and development program, a whole host of things that we could partner with entities on. On the economic development side, historic preservation is firmly part of it. First thing we need to do is reactivate the Historic Preservation Commission. There is some funding we could pursue to support property owners and businesses in terms of rehabilitation, but our town's history is important, and whether anyone knows this about it or not, history lovers do come here. But without a functioning commission, our opportunity to get grants and funding is significantly limited. Housing recommendations include the zoning issue we had already discussed. What we didn't say before is that currently many property owners, if they want to rehabilitate their house and put an addition on it, most have to come and bear the cost in both time and financial resources to come before the board for a variance to do so. It's not only onerous, but it's unnecessary when we have the power to correct it through revising our zoning. Affordability remains a big issue that needs to be addressed through the adoption of a housing plan. Such an effort would also include accessory dwelling units for in-law suites. Again, with more analysis, of course. But such a plan would also deal with housing rehabilitation and supporting folks, particularly the elderly, keep their properties in good shape and help them age in place. Open space. We have fantastic opportunities all over the place. Bordentown City has great bones. We just need to connect the dots. The big takeaway in this section is to provide support for the Environmental Commission as they started to outline an open space element for the master plan. This could also be utilized to support the city commissioners in their capital improvement planning and also seeking grants moving forward as well. In our minds, a huge opportunity lies in the wonderful waterfront we have. We do have great boat access, but we need to expand pedestrian access to the river and creek networks, whether you're talking about the Blacks Creek or the Crosswicks. We have the opportunity to tie together areas from Lime Kiln all the way through to Point Breeze. A little coordination and we're cooking. Circulation and parking is of course a big aspect of our community, but not just for automobiles. We need a comprehensive circulation plan that includes parking management. The city has been a recent recipient of a grant from the DVRPC that will address the situation in detail, and likely such an undertaking of plan could be done by the end of this year. The hope is to get a plan laid down so we can start going after project grants. So that's the brief on the plan. Bottom line is, let's continue to be creative, exploring partnerships, utilizing creative ways to connect people with places, infill opportunities that trade off public space for development opportunities, parking management and the potential of use of private lots, but also the notion of treating our public streets as public spaces. As important as any of this is continuing to explore ways to expand community engagement. The Planning Board is committed to it through this process and has gone above and beyond the statutory requirements. But we can always do better. We must do better. With that said, thank you. Written comments are due by the end of this week, and we hoped you enjoyed hearing about the plan, and we are here for any questions that you might have. Please utilize office@latinigleats.com for any written comments by the end of this week. Thank you so much.